Mr. President, I often speak of Hoosiers whose service, patriotism, and sacrifice capture the spirit we celebrate on civic holidays. For Flag Day, however, I rise to share the story of a Hoosier who didn't merely embody the occasion, she helped establish it. And she made history too. Alice Sanger played such an important part in Benjamin Harrison's presidential campaign in 1888 as a stenographer that he made her an important part of his presidential staff. So Alice left her home in Indianapolis for Washington, D.C. to become the first woman ever to serve on a president's staff. The historic distinction doesn't quite capture the breadth of Alice's service to the president and to our nation, though. Neither did her title of clerk or contemporary reporters' descriptions of her, which often dwelled on her looks and her clothes. So let me share with you what this clerk did in the White House. It's quite remarkable. A Renaissance woman who was skilled with a paintbrush and had an ear for music. Alice could take dictation on 200 words a minute without a single misspelling. She had discretion, seldom seen in Washington, now and then, and she was known as a jewel of secrecy in the White House. Not only did she type President Harrison's annual address to Congress, she was given sole responsibility of safekeeping it until it was sent here to the Capitol. She personally read through all of the President's and First Lady Caroline Harrison's correspondence, and she answered much of it in her own hand. During the late 19th century, no woman's signature was better known in America than Alice's. In 1893, after losing his bid for re-election, Harrison left the White House, but Alice remained. You see, she was so essential to the executive branch's function that the new president, Grover Cleveland, from a different political party, asked her to stay on. In 1894, she moved to the Post Office Department, which was then a significant cabinet-level agency. She was no less indispensable in that capacity. For decades, she managed budgets and advertising. She kept track of regulations and postal laws, and she assembled the 700-page directive that guided the operations of every post office in America. She was a masterful organizer. She planned war bond drives, donations to the Red Cross, and holiday celebrations, including the one we mark today. Now, the idea of commemorating the day in 1777, when the Continental Congress created our national banner, was not her own. Celebrations of the American flag were staged periodically around the country dating back to the 1860s. But in 1908, Alice, as part of her responsibilities at the post office, planned and staged a grand celebration for Flag Day. The sound of bands and distinguished speakers lifted out of the old post office building's courtyard where a giant American flag hung. In the years that followed, other government departments joined in the celebration with their own Flag Day festivities, in large part due to Alice's efforts. States followed suit, many with input from Alice herself, who advised local post offices on appropriate celebrations. Presidents Wilson and Coolidge recognized Flag Day with proclamations. And in 1949, the 81st Congress passed, and Harry Truman signed, legislation formally establishing its observance. You see, there's some harmony between Alice's career and her work to promote Flag Day. When we look up at the Stars and Stripes, we catch America's reflection. It's a symbol of our ideals, after all. Wherever it waves, on battlefields where we have defended it, alongside the graves of those who had died for it, in front of the places where its democracy lives, courthouses in our towns, state houses in our cities, the dome under which we meet, and from the homes across the republic for which it stands, our flag represents the promise of freedom and self-government, that any man or woman can live their life in pursuit of happiness. But it also is a reminder that the work of honoring those ideals goes on. It's fitting, then, that on Flag Day we remember Indiana's Alice Sanger. This Hoosier served her country so faithfully in an era where pathways for women to do so were so few. So on Flag Day, we raise a pair of salutes, one to Old Glory, forever may she fly, and a second to the trailblazing spirit of Americans like Alice. Long may it live. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.
The clerk will report the motion to invoke cloture.